and spelling of your first and last name.
We are going. Anytime you guys are ready.
I'm just serious. I just
My name is Liz. Bishop. It's B-I-S-H-O-P. And my title is soon to be retiree. Oh, that's not a word I like. I have a friend who told me that the word to use is leisurist. I'm about to become a leisurist.
It's kind of like back in the day when they called a like a genteel, right? It's like a gentleman, like someone that's just, you know. Like
I don't know that one.
Like a gentleman, like their profession is like is a gentleman, like they. You know,
oh, okay. Oh, I
something
see.
like that.
Yeah.
But so I guess we won't do the first one, but the first question I wanted to ask you was, so 1973, you're 20 years old, you go into CBS 6 as a sportscaster, totally male-dominating industry. I have no idea what that must have been like. Can you give us an idea of what it was like to be a woman in a newsroom that year?
Well, yes, I can, because I actually experienced that before I went to WRGB. I was a sophomore in college when I went to WRGB, but I started working at the Times Union in their sports department when I graduated from high school. I was like a clerk in the sports department. So we'd answer phone calls, type up race results, golfing results, all kinds of things like that. And when I applied for the job, I applied for the job, 2 other guys applied at the same time, and all 3 of us were hired. But they had to go through like a rigid test, and they just kept asking me, do you really know anything about sports? I said, oh yeah, I was the editor of my high school sports paper, so let me say that. I was the editor of my high school newspaper, a sports editor. So I knew all about sports. I grew up with 3 brothers. I was, kind of a tomboy. All I wanted to do was hang out with them, and so I followed sports religiously. And so I got that job, and that was my first experience with being in an all-male world. And so I did that for about maybe about a year and a half, and about a year in, they gave me a column to write. Again, because women's lib. I'm all over the lot here. Let me try this again. I am incredibly grateful for women's liberation, because I don't think I would have ever had the opportunities that I had. I know a lot of women would say that today, but I mean, I was right in the thick of it. It was a time when women were sort of asserting themselves in the marketplace, and men had to listen. And I think that there were some far-sighted people, like the man who became my news director at WRGB, Dunn, who saw an opportunity to sort of take advantage of certain opportunities that came their way, like a woman who knew about sports. Mm-hmm. He was thinking about hiring a woman to do sports on the weekend, and he had just about hired a woman when he decided to just audition me before he sealed the deal with her. She was older. I don't really know what her credentials were, but they were very close to hiring her. And so he had me come in because he read my column. I had a Sunday column in the Times Union. It was called, well, they had 2 names. One was a lib look at sports, and the other was look to libs. So, but they were, to make the Sunday paper was really a big deal back in those days. John read my column, asked me to come in. I auditioned. I was 20 years old, sophomore in college, and I was pretty terrible, and I got the job.
I don't believe that.
No.
The job.
All right. Well, the story is that when I went for the audition, back in that day, everything was ripped right off the teletype. So everything was just like handed a bunch of pieces of paper and told to read them. That was how I did my audition. And one of the stories was about, and I can't remember who it was, some famous athlete who had died. And so as I'm reading along on the air, I said, it was supposed to say, I'm going to get it right because I'm probably still getting it wrong. He died as he lived, a great man. And I said, he lived as he died, a great man. And I started laughing. And this voice came over the PA system in the studio, and it's a woman's voice, and she goes, listen, baby cakes, don't ever do that if you get this job. And I was like stunned, and I'm like, I'm so sorry, can I do it again? this time. So they let me do it again, and I got it right, and I still got the job.
On the God mic, right? Coming over.
Yeah.
Listen,
yeah.
don't get cute.
That's right. Listen, baby cakes on the like, okay.
Aside of, you were saying that your news director at the time, once you got hired, had a lot of foresight and was like, we should get her out there. Were you treated differently at all? I mean, did you get any? I'm thinking like flack from guys being like, I don't know what you're talking about. And you're like, I have 3 brothers, like, try me.
Yeah, constantly.
It's got to be tough and
back
intimidating.
and again, in 1973, there was no text, there was no email. It was all letters and phone calls, and there was just a flood of them that would come in, written to the station. How dare you put this woman, obviously doesn't know anything about it. I don't even think girl, I think they called me a girl because I was 20 years old, but this girl on TV, she doesn't know what she's talking about, without really a lot of reason behind that, because obviously I did, and I didn't make a lot of like really egregious mistakes, so it was just, I think that they felt threatened, and they started responding to that, and then I would get the letters, you said this, or what do you know, or get off the air, or get the broads out of broadcasting, all that stuff, and at 20 years old, that can be pretty hurtful, especially when it wasn't as if I ever set out to be that person or to get that job. I mean, I was just asked to audition, and I thought, well, won't that be fun? And I went, and I got the job, and then the reality of what that job meant, was that it was going to be hard. It was going to be hard to win all these guys over. But I will say that there were a lot of guys that wrote in and said, hey, we didn't think you could do it, but you're doing a good job. So that was the reinforcement I needed to keep going. And I think those letters back in the early days might have been the reason 52 years later I'm still sitting here.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, you develop the tough skin, but you also have those reinforcing emails that are like, okay, I'm doing fine. It's not all just these miserable people sending you hate.
No, they were. I can't tell you how gracious and kind. I think if there's anything I'm going to miss about leaving, it is just the generosity of the viewers over all these years toward me. I talk about this because it's so important to me that people will come up to me today of all different ages and say, I started watching you because my grandmother loved you, or my grandfather, thought you were cute, or my parents said, we got to watch Liz. And so there is this continuum that happened that is so special to me. I mean, people think they always are kind of like, a little embarrassed to tell me those stories. And I say, you don't understand. That means everything to me, because it means that, I was part of their family. They watched me grow up. That's what made it so special for me, was I really think like those grandparents thought of me as one of their own kids and watched me, mature and get better and just grow up right in front of them. That's the world to me. So that's, ask me what I miss the most, and it's that kind of feedback, that kind of like really special, generous feedback.
Just because you're retiring doesn't mean that's going to stop either. You'll have people coming up to you forever saying that.
But I think, well, maybe I didn't phrase that right. Maybe it isn't so much to be the thing I miss the most, but it's the thing I cherish the most about this job.
Olivia started got into news because of you. She told me that.
I saw what she wrote on Facebook. I was really touched by that, and really surprised too. I don't think anybody thinks about the impact that they're making while they're just trying to live their lives. And honestly, being this person on TV was just me trying to live my life and enjoy it, because I loved every minute of it. It was magic for me. Has been magic for 52 years. But then every now and then, something will remind you that you can make a difference even without trying. Just living your life, and that also is really special. So I'm very honored that I was the one that kind of spurred her into it, because she's very good.
Yeah, she's like, I've only seen her like maybe twice, but like first time I saw her, I was like, this is crazy, because You know, I grew up watching her. She's the reason I got into this. I love that picture you posted of yourself, very young.
Oh,
maybe
yes.
was this what, your first year or something?
Yeah. I think I didn't mind it. That was my desk, and I was the way the newsroom used to be set up. It wasn't even in the room that we're in now. It was all the way down the hall, and I was in the last seat all the way down the room, and with my then
Like down the hall that's in construction right now?
yes,
Yeah.
right, all the way down to the end though, right by the stairs there.
Yeah.
And in that picture, I think there's an electric typewriter, but I started on a manual typewriter.
Like the
Yeah, and everything was on, everything was on paper. We did. It's funny. I found a bunch of stuff that was like 3-part copy. What do you call it? With the when you type and it comes out on the ones after it.
Carbon paper.
Carbon paper. That's it. So like 3-page carbon paper. So you type on the first one, and then you rip out the other ones, and they would be distributed to people. And that's how everybody had the same script when we went into the studio. Pretty,
so different. I know.
pretty non-advanced. That's all there is.
If that girl was sitting where I am right now, and you had like some type of advice to give her, what would it be?
Boy, I thought about this a long time. I think it was just not to take it as seriously as I did. Just to again, this all gets back to being in a male-dominated world and feeling this incredible responsibility to get everything perfect. And so when I didn't get things perfect, I was mortified. I can remember one sportscast. This was fairly early on. Actually, I think it was my second week. It was my second week, because the first week I had a great first week. And then the second week, I made some fairly glaring error on the air. I don't know if I can't really remember what it was, whether it was technical or something I said. And they pointed out to me after it was done, and I was so upset. I went and got physically sick. And I think that was what I learned over time. I always was trying to be perfect, and I think it would have been okay if I had just been as good as I could have.
Yeah, it would have.
Yeah.
But you didn't know, like you said, that's an amazing amount of pressure.
Yeah, well, I think it was. I don't even think I was always aware of it. That was the motivation, or just that. Boy, this, people doubt me. I gotta convince them.
Yeah.
And so that was what I was up to.
Yeah, that like sick feeling. I understand that. Your parents, you had a very close relationship with both of them. I mean, I came in when I was at CBS 6. I think I'm not sure if your mother had passed away, but you were very involved with your father.
Yes.
Were they throughout your career just your biggest cheerleaders?
Yes.
Were you the only daughter?
Yes. 3 brothers and me, and 2 of the greatest parents in the history of great parents. They were everything. They were my sounding board. They were my rooting section. Nobody could have been more fiercely loyal, more in my corner, more loving. Mom and Dad never missed a newscast. And I say that, absolutely certain that they never missed one of my newscasts. And my dad, God bless him, would tape all of my big shows. And I have them all. They're all on
VHS.
VHS, so I can't really do a lot with them just yet. But there's going to be a time, and all handwritten, that this was such an event, written by my dad on the box, that he wanted to make sure that he kept them for me personally to have, and then presented them to me. And my mom, she made a scrapbook from the time I was doing that column at the Times-Union. Never knew she had done it, and then presented it to me. I mean, I just, I cried so hard, They were the best. And my brothers, I was trying to think of how to describe my brothers' reaction to me. I think they thought they would be cool and just, not make too much of it, but they were clearly very proud of me, and hopefully still are.
They probably took some credit. They're like, hey,
she would have known anything.
How do you think she knows about sports?
Or they said, I should be doing that. But I don't think so. I think they were just, quietly proud because that's what brothers do.
All right, so these are just kind of the favorite interview of all time.
I put a question mark after
You
that
did
one. My favorite of all time.
Besides this one, where you had to change clothes.
This is not my favorite interview because I never like being interviewed. I always think people will see, what a real sham I am. That I can ask them questions, but I can't answer them.
Very nice to do this.
No, I just mean I'm not good with the answers, and I always am good with the questions. So people would have figured that out, or probably have by now. So, oh gosh, I don't know. Let me come back to that one. Or let me just think for a couple minutes because I did put a question mark, and then I didn't have time to go back to it.
Yeah, that's fine. Story that impacted you the most. It could be a tragic story, super happy story. Is there one in your mind that just kind of like, you thought about it days, weeks, months later?
Yes, I have actually 3 stories. So, and they're all very emotional. They were all very emotional for me. I would say probably topping the list was being at Ground Zero on September 11th with the New York Search and Rescue Team.
You went there.
I went there. I was with them on the bus as they drove into Manhattan at about, I don't know, by the time we got down there, maybe 3 o'clock in the afternoon of 9/11.
Of the day?
Yes.
Wow.
And so, and we had no idea, other than the little bit we had seen on TV before we boarded those buses. We had to drive to Yonkers to meet up with the bus, and then the bus took us in. And so we really had no idea what we were going to encounter when we got there. But everyone on that bus, myself included, believed we were on a recovery mission. I was there to help chronicle, record what they did, because it was really just an amazing effort by these men and women who just totally disregarded their own personal health and safety to try and save others. But, as we drove into New York, the city that is teeming with life was silent. There was no one on the street. There was no signs of humans anywhere. It was the eeriest thing I've ever seen in my life. And when we finally got to Ground Zero and saw the devastation in person, it was beyond anything you can imagine. There was white paper just flying around our heads, and this awful chemical smell in the air, and a fire engine, literally, it must have been tossed like a toy, upside down, right by where we were standing, and people rushing left and right, and running into where the devastation was to try and look for survivors. But I think that it wasn't very long before we all knew that we were there on a recovery mission, not a destination, and it was, I've never felt such sadness in my life, just such horror. And so I would say that of all the events that I've somehow been a part of, that was the one that I will never forget, that I can still see as vividly in my eye today as when I was there.
I can't believe you were there the afternoon.
Yeah.
I mean, with all that dust everywhere and the...
Yeah, it was. We slept on the sidewalk that night.
Oh my gosh.
And so, and I was only there because I had to. There was no way to get this video on the air, so we had to go back the next day. We stayed till about mid-afternoon, and then we began trying to get back to our car, which was in Yonkers. So there was nobody on the street. We finally found a taxi. I don't even know what we paid the guy, but we drove us to Yonkers to get back to the car. So we could video back and get out there, which we did do. But it was just, and the point I wanted to make was that these men and women, this search and rescue team, they stayed there. And, they have encountered, and I've stayed in very close contact with them, they have encountered just enormous health issues from the time that they spent there. And yet, you ask them to a man or woman, and they will say they would do it again. I mean, that's just, that's what you learn from this job. There are incredibly special people. That's not even a strong enough word. I can't think of the word. Extraordinary people that will give everything they've got and don't ask anything in return. And that's, if you ask me, what will I remember? That's what I remember. That's an impact all on itself. You know, one of the greatest impacts of the work that we do. The other two stories, again, were me traveling out of the area. I went to Italy. They sent me to Italy to cover. I don't even really know how they found me, but I got a call one day at work from a man with a very thick Italian accent saying that he was like the mayor of this little village in Italy. And they were trying to get information about a soldier from Poland who had saved their village during World War II. And they wanted to honor him. And so I said, well, you know, we got to be there for that. That's an incredible thing. And so we went, Ed Curley, a photographer, Ed Curley and I went to this little town in Italy. I can't remember the name of it. I can't remember the soldier, and I can't find the video, which is crushing to me because it was really an incredibly impactful story that everybody there just wanted to say, thank you. He was killed by saving these lives. He held off the Nazi, or he was in Italy, so he probably held off Mussolini's men. But at any rate, well, they. I'm pretty sure. Don't lose this part, but I'm pretty sure it was the Germans.
Yeah.
So we held off the Germans and they saved the village.
Huh.
So I mean, it was just incredible. But it was the gratitude that was all these years later, and I'm like, oh wow, you know, people don't forget. They just don't forget. But maybe because I didn't tell that story really well. I hate to be like directing my video here, and I don't trust you either.
Hey, what reason do you have not to trust me? Because I didn't show up looking like a
That's
bum.
right. Well, it wasn't even that, but actually I can't remember what the
9/11 Italy.
I know. I went somewhere else.
You know, I went to the border?
No.
I don't know what surprises me more, the fact that the town reached out to Liz all those years, you know,
Yeah.
to do, or the fact that the station flew somebody
Right, yeah.
to freaking Italy.
Well, back then it was,
Oh, I know.
it was different.
Yeah, back then, that's the thing. I mean, I got into TV, and that was one of the things I wanted to say. I got into TV, what I would call their teenage years, or their 20s or 30s, whatever, however you want to describe it, when anything was possible, and you could go anywhere, and you could do anything because nobody else was doing it. Like today, you just have to, hit your clicker and somebody's there covering some big story. But if we had a connection to it, we had to go. And so I've been to Europe 5 times for the station. And this was my third story that I wanted to tell you about the impact was just around, gosh, I wish I could remember the year, but I would say the late 90s. The late 90s. Is that when Brad was there?
Yeah.
In the late 90s.
Yeah.
So in the late 90s, the station sent me and my co-anchor, Brad Holbrook, to Macedonia to cover the refugee camps that were set up for the Kosovo refugees who had been displaced from their homeland. And it was partly because this was completely dominating the news. It was so horrific that these people were just literally being forced out in the middle of the night in their pajamas and set up in tents in a foreign country to them. And so we went, and it was so overwhelming to see these thousands and thousands of people living in tents who could be you or I. That was the thing, that they had their little kids with them who were just running around in the mud, and they were doing their laundry with soap and pails, and a day or two before they'd been sitting in their homes, perfectly content without any warning or explanation that they were going to be just shipped out in the middle of the night. Not really even shipped out, just forced out, and then forced to go on this, huge, long walk really to get to where they would be safe. It was just, I've never been struck by just the resiliency of people, and here was this country, Macedonia, that set this whole thing up. Nobody there wanted them, but they had to be, the responsible party, and they took it on. And I mean, nobody wanted them because it was a strain on all their systems. I don't mean that they didn't want people, but so Macedonia, accommodated. I mean, everything about it was just really very, very moving, and again stayed with me for forever. Really.
Oh, when you went over there, did you stay in a hotel, or like did they?
We stayed in a hotel, and we would go there.
To the camp.
It was more like somebody's house.
Yeah.
We stayed in somebody's house,
Yeah.
and and then we would go there every day and just sort of compile all their stories, and their stories were very simple. I mean, they were just everyday folks who were thrown out in the middle of the night from their own homes, and not knowing that they would ever get back there, or it was an eye opener. I mean, we just take so much for granted, and here they were. And again, I keep getting back to, they reminded me of people I knew,
Craziest thing that has ever happened to you on a live shot, on the anchor desk, something crazy in all these years has to have happened. We can go PG-13.
No, I don't. I mean, we were watching some bloopers, and craziest thing, I guess maybe it's not all that crazy, but I did jump out of an airplane. I did jump out of an airplane for a story on skydiving. I was really young at the time, and the photographer who went with me was like, at the time, I don't think anybody would challenge me on this, our greatest photographer. His name was John Chow, and he was just this really, really talented young guy. And so anyhow, I had to go through all the training to learn how to do it. We didn't do it as a double jump.
Tandem? You weren't tandem?
No tandem. This was a static line. So I had to go through a lot of training, and we shot all the training, and then we finally went up, and they sent me up with a guy who had gone up 13 times without ever getting out of the plane. So this was going to be my inspiration, I guess. I don't know why they thought that was a good idea, but they sent me up with him, and he was supposed to jump out. Once again, he did not get out of the plane, but when it came to me, they give you commands like, get up, get out, jump. And so by the time you're at that point, you're like Pavlov's dog, get up, get out, jump. So the guy says it, and I jump, and I land very safely, and I've got the mic on. I'm saying something about, this is great. I recommend it to everyone. And then I grab the parachute and I go back to the plane. John Chow had gotten plane sick, so he got plane sick, and so he couldn't, because the door was open. Whatever caused him to get sick, he did not record it. So
he didn't record.
He only got me on the ground. So I had to jump a second time, so we would have it on film. And so I didn't really mind. But the second time, it was a little dangerous because I just missed a lake. And I mean, if that parachute had landed over my head, I don't know what I would have done.
Yeah.
So anyhow, but that. I guess if you want to ask me crazy, that was crazy.
Oh my gosh! How did he even break the news to you that he had not?
I think the pilot told me. I don't think John told me. We called him Chow. I don't think Chow told me, but I mean, he was embarrassed, and I'm like, hey, these things happen, and let's go. And then off we went.
I'm like, get out of the plane. Okay. back to retiring. What's next for Liz?
Well, this one was almost another question mark too. I don't really have firm plans. I think that my goal is to give back, because I think that, I told you before that I just sort of lived my life, but I think that in some ways I did that a little selfishly. Like there were, I certainly tried to be helpful. I don't know. I don't know if I want to say that or not. I just want to do something good for somebody else, and I haven't felt like I've done enough of that. So I'm going to, I'm going to somehow, hopefully, get involved with one of the, nonprofits or charities that I have worked with for a number of years, and hopefully make a difference. That's really, I tell everybody about this book because it made a real impression on me. I'm reading this book. It's called The New Happy. I don't know if you've heard of it, but the idea is that we go through our lives trying to achieve things, to acquire things, to be somebody, to do all these things, and each one of the steps along the way almost requires us to make another step to keep that process going. Mm-hmm. But in fact, the real way to be happy is just two things you have to do, and that is to be true to yourself and to serve others. So I think that the first part I've done pretty well. I think that over the course of this career I've been pretty true to myself. But now it's time to serve others, and that's really what I'm hoping, that there's a perfect fit out there for me. If anybody's watching, if there's a perfect fit, if you've got something you think that I'd be good at it, let me know. So that's probably the number one thing. And I started a book when I was during the pandemic, but it required a lot of research, and I didn't have the time or sort of the mental wherewithal to do that. So I think I'm going to go back and get back at that book, because I read it over and I go, ooh, it's pretty good.
Can I ask what kind of book it is?
No, you can.
Okay. All right.
You just have to read it. Really, you'll be the first and only person to buy it when the time comes.
You know that's not true. Is there something about you that something that you don't think viewers have ever known about you that you would like them to know? It can be something quirky. It can be. You only see a certain, portion of someone's life really when you're watching them on TV. But is there something?
I think I put a question mark next to this too, but I think that I personally think that I'm kind of shy, and I don't think anybody would pick that out from meeting me or talking to me, that I am a little, not really introverted, but a little closed off, just a little bit reluctant to be that big personality that sometimes I feel I kind of give that impression that maybe I am that person.
It's like an introverted extrovert.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I think, sometimes I'm just socially shy, and it surprises even me, that, boy, I've met so many people, and I've enjoyed so many encounters with different people, but a little part of me thinks, I wonder if they'll like me, and so then I hold back a little bit, but I guess that would be it.
Okay.
All right?
Yeah.
It's weird.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not.
I
mean, a lot of people with me, I tell them that I really don't like emceeing events because I have incredible stage fright.
Oh, I went through that.
I went through panic attacks. I take medication for it.
Really?
I almost got out of news. Yeah, I couldn't do it. I was like losing it. But I mean, this obviously, but I tell that to people, and they're like, well, how do you do the news and this? I'm like, there's no one in the studio.
Yeah.
And I've gotten more, as the older I've become, more confident. But yeah, that crippled me. Maybe 10 years ago, something, I almost got out.
Listen, well, I could have used that one too. I do the Melodies of Christmas. How many years have I done it? 40 years. I am in a cold sweat from the minute I walk in that theater to the end of the fourth show. It is the most terrifying experience for me to get up there on stage and project this confident, well-rehearced, and it's hard. That's really hard. And while everybody else is like socializing and having a great time, I'm going over my lines over and over and over again in a pure panic that I'm going to mess it up.
And that the audience wouldn't think anything of it.
No, they'd be fine with it. But to me, this all gets back to trying to be perfect. I don't want to be the one who messes up the show. That's what it is. I don't want to be the one. So.
No, Floyd's going to mess up the show.
That's right. Let him mess up the show.
Let Floyd mess up the show.
Really. So.
Well, is there anything else that you want to add that you think is important or worth noting?
I think the only thing I would like to say, and I'm going to say this at every chance I get, is thank you. Thank you to all of the incredible people that I have met over this lifetime of work who have just supported me and rooted for me and been so kind and generous that I never felt I deserved. That I just want them to know that in my heart, this is what I take away. That I probably would never ever be able to live up or deserve all the kindness that people have shown me over my years in this job.
You gonna miss it?
Of course I am. I miss it already, and I haven't left yet. It's like, oh my God. I keep thinking, did I do the right thing? But I think it is. I think I will miss it, but I will. But I have a lot of faith in me that I will find something that rewards me, that will make me feel proud of myself, and that's really what I'm looking for. And I think again that takes me down a different path. That takes me to serving others, and which is something that I'm really looking forward to doing.
Great. How do you feel?
I'm just nervous about you.